52. A new skill. Despite Edward's warning to Quinn to take the fight seriously and employ all of his resources, he was never concerned that he might be seriously injured in this battle. There were two key reasons for this, the first of which was his unique ability. Most vampires and even creatures would assume he was indestructible, since he could convert his body into mist, as long as they didn't know how it operated. The second reason was that he couldn't feel scared when he looked at Quinn. Perhaps it was because he could tell his evolution was only that of a vampire noble, and he knew that he had recently become one as well. Holding out his hand, Edward was the first to attack. Blood spray! It was a move Quinn knew well, and suddenly a shotgun-like spray of blood came shooting out from Edward's hand. "Let's see your defensive skills then," Edward said. The shadow that was hovering over Quinn's back immediately moved to the front, covering his entire body, and once it had blocked the attack, Quinn moved it to the side. After all, this was training, and Quinn was only there to show off his skills, so he didn't charge in or do anything he typically would. "Okay, try again," Edward said, this time shooting out a blood spray once, and then a second time straight after. But it didn't matter for Quinn if it was one or two. His shadow would be able to block it, but this thinking was exactly what Edward thought it would be. Blood control. As he split his hands apart, the blood followed, as if he was performing telekinesis on his blood. Edward had control over the flow of blood and had shifted the direction of the onslaught. The two blood sprays were now coming from the side rather than the front. Quinn's shadow, on the other hand, was fast to respond and split in two, producing two blanket-like figures, covering his sides and deflecting the attack. "Looks like your defensive skills are quite impressive. I should have expected from the Punisher's power," Edward said. "Now let's see how you attack." Just as before, the mist began to fill the entire room, completely concealing it. The others could see Quinn through the mist, but had no idea where Edward was. "Should I use the Shadow Void?" Quinn pondered. "No, it'll be pointless." The Vampire Knights appear to be aware of the Shadow's abilities as well as its weaknesses. Furthermore, we will almost certainly be confronted with several opponents soon. I can't trust the Shadow Dome. Quinn saw a movement in the mist and threw a punch, but it hit nothing and the mist split apart once again. "A punch to the stomach," Edward said. Hearing the voice from behind, Quinn turned and threw out a kick, and all it did was move the mist about again. "Where is he?" "A kick to your back," Edward said again. "You would have been hit 2 times already by now. I know you would have had the shadow to protect you, but the shadow won't last forever. Quinn, I can see you have been human for most of your life now. You are relying far too much on your human senses, sight, hearing, touch. As a vampire, all our senses are far more heightened than that of others, and we also have new senses. When you faced Clark the Vampire Knight, or even went against Jin the Vampire Leader, could you not sense how dangerous they were? That wasn't in your head. That too is one of our senses. Right now, if you want to find where my true body is, you need to focus on that feeling." The voice was coming from all over, and Quinn tested and turned his head, trying to find out where the voice was coming from, but it was completely useless. Edward could see he still wasn't listening. "Fine." From the mist, Edward went in for the attack. As soon as his fingertips were felt on the back of Quinn's collar, Quinn decided to use the flash step directly behind him. A hand could be seen trying to touch where he was just seconds ago, but the rest of Edward's body was still invisible. The flash step, what a skillful move. The hand then suddenly disappeared, and once again fingers were felt on his collar, but Quinn wasn't fast enough to react as he was yanked down and thrown to the floor. But it's a move that all Vampire Knights know. Perhaps it's impressive for those around your age, but others will simply match you with this skill, making it pointless to use and just a waste of stamina, Edward explained. The mist started to disappear again, and now Edward was seen on the other side of the room. "That's enough of that. Is that all the skills you have in your arsenal?" "No, there are still a few things I haven't tried yet," Quinn said. Quinn had a remarkable talent that he could employ from this wide distance. Twisting his hip, he sent out his leg like a whip, launching a roundhouse kick. Blood Crescent Strike. Quinn sought to put as little ki into it as possible so as not to damage his power. Still, it was enough for Edward to see that this power was different. It was greater than a normal blood swipe. But as the attack moved forward, Edward continued to stand there, and when the attack hit his body, it had passed through him. Where the attack connected with his body mist could be seen as it went past, and it quickly disappeared after. That ability is so strong, Quinn thought. There were a couple of things Quinn hadn't tried yet. He had his new Bloodshot talent and Hammer Blood Strike, but it felt like both of these would be useless against Edward, as all attacks should just pass through his mist-like body. Until he learned how to hit his real body, then there would be nothing. "You must try to find a way," Edward said. "Some of the vampire leader's abilities are far worse than mine." "Could I grab him with my shadow?" Quinn pondered. "It would slow down his abilities' usage. More than likely, Edward can control when his body changes into a mist-like state. But it couldn't constantly be like that, otherwise he wouldn't be able to fight or touch. He can only switch because of his impeccable timing. Also, humans aren't the only ones limited by MC cells, so were vampires. So if he could, he would need to use his ability as little as possible. You know, when I fought against Clark, I was trying to think of a way to increase my attack power. During that time, an idea came up in my head to try something new," Quinn said. "I was saving this for the vampire leaders. I'm sorry, but I need to test out if this works first." "I can take whatever you have for me," Edward said. Edward was on the floor a few seconds later, blood streaming from the top of his shoulder. He was drenched in sweat and staring up at Quinn, who stood over him. "I knew it, of course. You would have to be special to become the 10th leader. Not just anyone can become a family head." "Master, perhaps one day you will be able to achieve that silly dream of yours," Peter said, watching from the side. While Timmy was speechless at what he had just seen, he didn't even know how to describe it. With Quinn's abilities measured, Edward had asked Timmy to get some blood packs that were located in the castle. When returning, both Quinn and Edward were given them to speed up the healing process. Quinn wasn't hurt, but he had used some blood attack, and it was best to just get him back up to speed. While they were resting, Edward had asked Quinn about how he had come across the shadow ability in the first place, and Quinn replied truthfully. This answer seemed to disappoint him a bit, as if he was expecting something. "Sorry, I just thought that after learning you had the Punisher's powers made, there were others out there. But it seems like you did just come across the power by chance. Punishers were very loyal to their own and would do anything to protect each other, so I thought there was a good chance that others might come to help you, but I guess they are all dead," Edward explained. "All right, next on the training list will be the Whites. As for you two, though, I have a special task," Edward said. "When Timmy gave the blood banks, I remembered that there was something I forgot to do. While I'm busy training with Peter, I want you to go out around the inner castle area and deliver everyone their blood packs for this week." "What? Why me? And won't I get recognized?" Quinn asked. "I promise you that this is also part of your training as well. I wouldn't waste time when we only have a short time frame. The other families aren't allowed to enter the inner area without permission, and I know you are going to complain about the guards and how you guys were let in easily, but the other vampires will stay true to this rule. Now go out there and deliver some blood." "New quest received. Deliver blood to the 10th people." Now, she had just finished telling Sia everything about herself, as well as her. How she didn't know much about Sia's background, except that they both used to operate for the terrorist organization Pure. She then disclosed that Layla had broken away from the organization and was no longer a member of it. Hearing all of this, Sia didn't really know how to react. When learning about herself, she didn't really know what to expect, but it certainly wasn't this. On top of it all, even though Layla was telling her all these things and she believed it, it still didn't feel real. It wasn't as if Layla's giving her these memories had suddenly become her own, since in her own thoughts she still knew nothing. She might have claimed Sia used to be Santa Claus and had the same reaction. This empty feeling in her mind couldn't be filled even after learning of her past. Seeing this, Layla didn't know what to do, but there was one thing she was sure about. It was the fact that her negative feelings were no longer there. She couldn't see the smog from before, and right now she didn't really know how to help her. "You know, Sia, there was something that happened before I really knew you," Layla said. "I used to have a friend, and due to some things, I had no choice but to send them over to Pure as well. At least there she was safe. Even though I knew what they did there, I just wanted her to live. When she left, I was a bit lost. I felt alone, but you helped me, looked after me, and looked out for me during that time, and I wanted to do the same. I don't know if you did so because it was your duty or mission, but I would like to think it was real, and that was the real Sia. During our time that we have spent together so far as well, even though you didn't have your memories, I would say you were more real now than before being influenced by Pure." Sia began to consider if it would be wise to return to Pure after hearing those comments. Layla, after all, only knew so much about herself and nothing about her parents, what school she attended, if any. Layla claimed that the sort of people Pure generally sought to recruit, especially at such a young age, had already lost everything. More often than not, they would have no family, relatives, or acquaintances, allowing the organization to remain entirely hidden. Thank you for telling me everything, Sia finally responded. I can tell you actually care for me. It's why I'm even here in the first place, but can't explain it. I know you want me to move on, make new memories, and try to forget about learning about my past, but it's like this empty hole in your mind. It feels like it needs to be filled. It's hard to explain. If you can, I would like it if you would help me get my memories back. Ask Quinn, ask the other vampires. It doesn't have to be now, I know you are busy, but please if you could do this for me. She started to think about it for a while. The main problem was if she was to have her memories returned, then quite possibly she would go back to Pure and report everything that happened so far. That was if she could even have her memories returned, which Layla still wasn't sure was a possibility. Seeing that Layla was taking a long time to respond, she could guess what the overlying problem of the whole thing was. It was trust, and there was one way she could gain their trust if nothing was to happen. Even though I don't want to, there is one thing we can do if you don't trust me, Sia said. As long as I'm with you, I think it will be okay, but if you can return my memories, then go ahead and let Quinn turn me as well. That way you know I'm on your side, right? Layla was against this idea almost instantly as she replied back. No, you don't understand what we have gone through, she said as she thought back to what Peter had become. Her evolution wasn't so bad, but even she had her ups and downs. Every time Quinn turned someone, it was a bit of a gamble of what they would become. On top of that, you will no longer have your ability. Your whole life could be changed with this. What life? Sia replied. Right now I have no life. I've only been at the academy with no memories for a month, and here for around 2 to 3 weeks. The way I see it, even if I was a vampire, it would be just like I was born one. There's not much of a life to give up. Layla wanted to say more to persuade her to stop, but staring into her eyes, she saw the same determination and intensity she had back then. She had already made her decision. She didn't hesitate to make her idea. Perhaps she had been thinking about it for a while before she asked. I will ask Quinn about it. Ultimately, it will be down to him anyway. I suggest you take some time to think about it, and if you want, you can go ahead and talk to the others, like Peter, who also used to be a human before all this. While the girls were busy having their discussion, both Logan and Vorden were busy in the research lab. Correction, Logan was busy away, while Vorden was sitting in the corner on a stool, spinning around a plastic tube in his fingers. He didn't know how long he had been doing it for, but knew it was a long time. Any new information yet? Vorden asked. This is the 5th time you've asked me that already, Logan replied, as a single drop of the green blood landed in a circle petri dish. This is why Peter was the perfect assistant. He would be there when I needed him, do as I asked and not ask too many questions. Well, Vorden replied, as he could see numbers running on one of the machines next to Logan. He didn't quite understand. It took Logan a little longer since this wasn't his own lab, and he also needed to learn a little bit about how to use the newfound technology. Thankfully, due to his ability, he was able to learn things quicker than most. You're right, though. I guess the 5th time's the charm for you? Anyway, I have found some interesting things. The DNA structure of the green blood, it seems to be a mixture of the beasts and... And what? Vorden asked. And humans, believe it or not. You found all that out from blood? No, the machines have some previous information on them from before as well. I guess this is just a reminder to us all. A reminder of what? A reminder of what the vampires really are. Although Quinn is our friend and is a vampire, more often than not we forget he was originally a human. So perhaps using him as a standard for all vampires is something we shouldn't do. Let me ask you, with all these vampires here, including the young ones and the ones at school, they all received blood packs, correct? And they all had human blood in them. Where exactly are they getting this supply of human blood from? And I don't need to remind you about all those bodies we saw in the laboratory back there. Human body parts are just used for experimentation. You know, I've been thinking if vampires always lived among us, then where were they during the First War? I couldn't find no such report on them at all. But what if they never saw us, humans, as living things in the first place? If something was trying to destroy all the ants in the world, I doubt there would be many that would step in to save them. To put it simply, I'm sure the vampires see us as nothing but food to them. And that's the problem, they still need us. This green blood powers them up. Might be the result of mixing both human and beast blood together. Perhaps the vampires were trying to create their own unnatural source, so they would no longer have to rely on us. It was a lot to think about, and Vorden couldn't pretend he hadn't considered these options. Vampires, as a matter of fact, were not friends of the human species. They were yet another enemy. If the human and vampire races ever went to war, Vorden began to wonder whose side Quinn would pick. Episode 454, A Simple Quest. Quinn had not anticipated getting a quest from the system after Edward had assigned him a duty. He was first uninterested, maybe thinking it was a waste of time. He needed to hone his talents through training and other means, especially since there didn't appear to be any beasts of any type in the vampire settlement. As a result, gaining experience would be difficult for him, but now that there was a mission tied to the actual task, Quinn was much more intrigued, especially since the prizes were concealed. When this had happened before, he had acquired a few intriguing items from completing the mission. On top of this, if he was to get EXP, then there was a good chance that he could level up a few times, bringing him closer to the rank of the Vampire Lord. Quinn was waiting outside for Timmy to return. He had gone back to the castle to get the blood packs needed for their task, and then he would guide Quinn around to all the establishments they needed to go to. Eventually, Timmy had returned with what looked like a crate with wheels on its back. There was nothing tied to it, and the front was a single circle that resembled an eye. There was nothing attached between Timmy and the robotic crate, but it continued to follow closely behind him. "Okay, let's get this done as quickly as possible, and then I can get to training the mist abilities as well," Timmy said, pumped up to do the task given. Quinn nodded in response, as he couldn't agree more. There was always the chance this quest was a complete waste of time, but the best way to find out was to get it done. Following Timmy, the crate continued to follow behind him. They were only delivering blood to the inner castle areas, so there shouldn't have been too much. "How many live in the inner castle area?" Quinn asked, trying to estimate how long this would take. "How many live here and how many are meant to be here are two different questions," Timmy replied. "We are to deliver the blood packs to 50 different households. These are the vampires that are meant to live here. Although some are from the pooling area that basically comes and stay over here most of their time anyway, like me. A lot of times, I would come to meet Edward and help him do tasks such as this." Eventually, they reached one of the large households in the area. A few knocks at the door were given, and an adult woman came out who was dressed quite nicely. "Oh, Timmy, is Edward not with you?" she asked. "I guess he must be busy with what happened at the tower earlier." Timmy glanced behind him, looking at Quinn. The citizens and the 10th people would be completely shocked if they were to find out that the new 10th leader was right beside him and in front of their very eyes. With a wave of Timmy's hand, the crate opened automatically. "Come on then," Timmy said. "Edward did say this was your task after all." A shipment of dry ice vapor could be seen flowing out of the box when looking inside. What astonished him was that there were considerably more than 50 or so blood bags inside. There were many thousand of them. "Please grab 30 or so blood packs for Miss Johnson." Quinn did as he was told and grabbed them all in one go and passed them over. While doing so, Miss Johnson stroked the top of Quinn's hand during the passover and placed the packs down by her side. "You're quite the handsome one now that I see you up close, aren't you?" she said with a flushed face. Quinn was not used to this kind of reaction. He had never been considered handsome when he was human. What he didn't understand was how much more attractive he had become with each development. Furthermore, the increased stats would subtly modify his physique each time, improving it beyond the capabilities of someone his age. Right now, Quinn was practically most girls' dream boy. "Thank you so much for the delivery, and I hope you can come again next time," she said. With the door shut, Quinn expected to see a quest complete notification, but there was no such thing, so he quickly decided to look at the status of the quest. "Deliver blood to the 10th people, 1 of 50 complete." It looked like he would have to finish the task before he would be getting any type of reward. The only good thing was the task seemed to be relatively easy. Seeing the blood packs, there were a few things that Quinn wondered. He waved his hand over the crate, and it opened just like it did when Timmy did so. Looking inside, there were really over 1,000 blood packs. "Why so many for so few people?" Quinn asked. "These blood packs are for everyone in the 10th family," Timmy replied. "In each family, there are 1,500 people, so each person should get at least one. Usually those that belonged in the castle would do this type of task, and the workload would be split. But Edward is the only one from the old that still belongs in the castle. Everyone else had left, and with no leader, there was nobody to decide who would be considered a close part of the family. So instead, we deliver the blood packs to those in the inner circle of the family, and they will go on to deliver it to the others. However, this does come with its problems. Some vampires come to Edward and say they never got their blood pack. The vampires could be lying just to get more, but usually you can tell a vampire that is starving and one who isn't. So, some of the vampires aren't delivering all their packs to the people. But you have no choice since there are only two of you doing this, but why? Quinn asked. You have to remember that the 10th family situation is different. The vampires in this family are full of those that never wanted to be here, but were forced here instead. They couldn't get into any of the other families, so they're stuck here. Edward guesses that some of the vampires are trading blood with the other families to get their favor. If they can get on other families' vampires' good side, there is more chance for them to be recommended into the family. What they don't realize is these vampires from other families are probably stringing them on. If they did invite them into their family, then where would they get the extra blood from? But people's dreams are an addictive drug. Listening to Timmy, Quinn felt like he sounded a lot wiser than his looks. Perhaps he had to grow up fast, living in a tough area such as this one, which gave him different views compared to others. Quinn then went to pick up the blood pack from the crate as there was something else he was interested in. There were other 1,000 different blood packs here. Unsure whether they came from the same person or different people, there was one thing he was sure about. It was the fact that they would make him stronger. However, the second he picked up the blood pack, and this thought had entered his mind, a new system message had appeared. Warning, any tampering with the quest item shall result in failure of the quest. Quest rewards will be void. Seeing this, Quinn immediately dropped the blood bag back into the crate, and any ideas he had of consuming the blood were now gone. If all of the blood bags were from different persons, Quinn would have reconsidered and consumed the blood nonetheless. But when he used his inspection talent, he noticed that the majority of the blood there belonged to the same person. This was a concerning thought for Quinn, who was beginning to wonder where they were getting all their blood from. For the time being, it was an idea he would store away and revisit later. The two of them would stroll around and perform the same thing they did with the first home, and if it was a lady, Quinn would generally get some sweet compliments. 25 of 50 complete. They were about halfway done finishing their tasks, and it had been a lot quicker than Quinn had expected, but he was starting to wonder why Edward had asked him to do such a task. He has said it would somehow improve or help with his training, but so far other than the quest, he saw no benefits of doing such a thing. They continued walking until they came to a more deteriorated neighborhood. It was still in the city center, but the buildings here were significantly poorer than the structures before. Not because of size or structure, but just because they hadn't been looked after. As soon as they had entered this area, Timmy was constantly looking around him as if he was paranoid. I have to warn you, Timmy began, but was cut off abruptly when a young adult appeared in front of them. A few seconds later, and it looked as if they were surrounded by 10 vampires or so. Is this what you wanted to warn me about? Quinn asked. Yes, Timmy replied. More often than not, there are vampires that try to steal the crate of blood from us, and usually Edward deals with them. Ha ha, one of the vampires in front of them began to giggle. That's correct, and it appears that Edward isn't here today for whatever reason. Did he believe it was now safe since the 10th vampires had returned to their former selves? Loyal to the unknown leader. Timmy, you already know you're no match for us. I doubt you would even be able to beat me, let alone 10 of us, so why don't you just hand over the blood? A little nervous, Timmy stood back to cover the crate, and at that moment, Quinn stepped forward. I know Edward isn't with him today, but you see, Edward left me in charge of today's guard duty. Please, if you could go easy on me as well, that would be great, Quinn said with a smile. Maybe this was part of the training.